I believe with all my being. You know, what a beautiful declaration of faith. But how many of us can say those words and mean them without a fiber of doubt? As I write this reflection, if I said that declaration aloud, I doubt myself. The devil has put doubt in my heart too many times with the question, did God really say? And do you really think so? And it's like I question my judgment so often that extended to me doubting my faith as well. Like, do I really believe? And so in response to that, in response to my faltering faith, but also, not faltering, sorry, in response to my unsureness of my faith, but also in acknowledgement of the faith I still cling to, I cry out, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And God answers that prayer time and time again. And by the end of this video, you'll find out how. You know, it's funny. I get this way, considering the realness of God's presence and Mary's influence in my life. In my last reflection on Rosary-in-a-Year, day 6, I shared how I'm in my second year of consecration to Mary. That is, I'm renewing my subscription. Ironically, day 6 of my consecration journey also touched on grace, you know, reminding me that zeal and the ability to become a saint are linked to the rosary, as day 7 of Rosary-in-a-Year points out. And it's funny how God works in that way, you know, even though I'm far behind everyone else in this Rosary-in-a-Year podcast, his message for me remains timely and unchanged. Hearing Father Mark Mary describe his journey to God through Mary made me reflect on my own relationship with her. As I mentioned in my reflection on day 5, I used to feel jealous of Mary. Like, my feelings toward her were sort of tumultuous, you know, like that love-hate relationship, or the awkwardness of being around someone whose goodness magnifies your own insecurities. And that stung because I was still wrestling with my pride. And I mean, maybe you've been there. Have you felt that way before? But yeah, when I tried to think more deeply about Mary being free from sin, I couldn't help but feel like it was unfair. And in my pride, I even caught myself thinking, like, God forgive me, why couldn't it have been me, you know? Like, looking back, I realized how little I understood Mary's life and her crosses. Like, you know, when you're young, you don't really think about the journey, do you? You think only about the destination. Like, oh my gosh, I want to be a queen too. Bruh, are you ready? Are you ready? Because, like, she was far from having it easy. Like, from being publicly shamed for carrying a child out of wedlock to living in poverty and ultimately witnessing her son's crucifixion. Like, what was I even thinking? Like, when we think pridefully, we don't think clearly at all. Like, we don't weigh the risks of our desires well. And I think that reminds me of, like, St. John and his brother James, or their mom, right? When their mom brought them before Jesus, who was like the Messiah, and they predicted them as, like, they thought the Messiah was like gonna, like, you know, become a huge king of a castle and everything. They're like, she was like, let my son sit on your right or left. You know what I'm saying? Like, that desire for greatness, right, comes out like that pride. Sometimes anyway. I mean, there can be cases where you if you're desiring to be great in the kingdom of heaven, I wonder, is that coming out of pride, or is that coming out of just, I don't know, you want to be as much like Jesus as possible? But I wonder, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Like, is it pride to want to be great in the kingdom of heaven, or is it because it's not bad? I mean, God has said, if you desire to be great, those who want to be great in the kingdom of heaven should, like, occupy the lowest space. Like, you know what I'm saying? So you end up becoming humble as you desire greatness. I think that's the beautiful thing about the kingdom. It's like, even if you started with the wrong heart intention, for instance, let's say you become a priest out of pride, but then, like, as you're on your journey, you become humble. Like, you meet all these people who you realize have way more, they've gone through so much more, their faith has been tested in so many more ways, and their faith has been tested in ways that if your faith got tested in those ways, you might have just completely just given up, lost the path. You know what I'm saying? But they held firm. You know what I'm saying? They more strongly resemble those saints of old that, like, are so holy and everything. And so as you look at these people, you become you are humbled as you still battle, as you become more aware of your own, like, inadequacies and of your own, like, emptiness, your messed upness. You become humbled. And it's like, so even if those who desire to be greatest in heaven should become like the servant of all, it's like your journey to becoming the servant of all, which is where you'll be greatest, right? In your journey, you become humble. So even if you started with pride because you wanted to be greatest, your journey will make you humble, because to be great is to be the lowest. Does that make sense? I think it's pretty cool, isn't it? Anyway, so yeah, I digressed, and I'm going to do that a lot in this video. I'm sorry. Yeah, if you're for that, if you like these digressions, that's what we subscribe, you know? But anyway, when we think pridefully, we don't think clearly at all, as you could tell from my earlier reflections. Like my whole struggle with Mary, and, you know, we just thank God for the growth, you know? So God takes imperfect people and he makes them perfect. And I am confident that I am on my way, for he promises to complete the good work he has begun in us. And indeed, it is through Mary he does so. And so yeah, let's go back down memory lane and talk about like my own experience with like Mary and her guidance and what that looks like. Because Mary doesn't walk the earth with us, you know, at this time. But she did walk the earth. And she does still live now because she lives in Christ. She's experienced the resurrection. Moreover, she's experienced it both in body and in soul. Like her body has resumed, you know, much like how Jesus has. And so it's like, it's pretty incredible, right? It makes sense that, you know, she should, like, how we see it is like, you know, Jesus is the head, she's the neck, and the rest of the body shall follow. But how do we experience a relationship with her? I mean, outside of like, you know, what mystics experience, which is like the whole seeing Mary sitting down beside you and praying the rosary with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say you're not a mystic. Let's say you're a person who has normal spiritual sight, which is, you probably don't have much of it. So how does it go? If I may share my own growth, or where I have gotten so far, you know, it all started with a miraculous medal I received in the most intense study season of my high school career. I think that's when I started to feel Mary's impact more directly in my life. It's not like she wasn't there before. I was still praying rosaries. I was a Catholic, a cradle Catholic, but I wasn't really that involved with my faith. But this miraculous medal event happened just before I began to become more serious. So yeah, before the event that led me to become more serious with my faith, and that event from there, so now I had my awakening, as I like to say. So I had been getting C's and D's in AP Calc for the entire year, and that was a month till the official AP exam, and I was like, oh no, you know. But COVID had allowed schools. Like, COVID had schools permitting students to stay at home if they preferred. So I took advantage of the opportunity and I studied like crazy a month before the exam. And my mom showed her support by bringing to my study cave a miraculous medal. And for some reason, I got really emotional. I thought it was the support I showed at that time. And to my great surprise, later on I learned that's a reaction quite a few have had upon first gazing at a miraculous medal. So needless to say, I kept studying, I kept praying, but in between breaks and stuff. I even did a rosary novena, Mary Undoer of Knots, I think. And doubly needless to say, but under Mary's guidance, I hit it out the park with a 5 out of 5 on the AP exam. And that's despite bad grades the entire year. Like, yeah, I put in the work, but just to share that's miracle. So, a miracle that I could cover like an entire year of AP Calc, and I managed to revisit it and understand it with only a month of study, despite needing to sleep, eat, and everything else. And then the exam got 5 out of 5. I mean, that's straight up God, right? Because look, see, I ain't Albert Einstein. I ain't got that IQ. So we really thank God. But after here, we enter the darkest period of my life, which is like, despite all my studying, despite literally studying my teenage years away, I had failed to get into university. And not because like I hadn't got admission or I even had a scholarship opportunity, but because my dad said no. And in his house, what he says goes. And yes, this might be hard for you, for some of you to understand. Like, why didn't I just go anyway? But I didn't have the finances nor the know-how to take myself from the country I was in, that was Nigeria at the time, when my dad kind of was in charge, kind of like we all kind of depended on him, to Germany, where I got my scholarship. And I didn't even know where or how I would begin in like that whole navigating all that whole thing. Not to mention the scholarship didn't exactly cover feeding, my plane travel and everything else, like visa application and what. So I was completely dependent on my dad for his help. And since he had said no, what could I do, So I was completely crushed, not even from the scholarship opportunity failure, but just having studied so hard, even having got admission, but some of the admissions that weren't for scholarships, I couldn't pay for the tuition. And that just left me completely crushed and angry and rebellious at God and depressed and just, everything that comes. And I was like, why am I even alive? I had thought angrily to God, my life seemed to have lost all purpose because all I knew at the time was to study. And it was around that time that Mary moved her children to save me, My mom, familiar with my dad's antics and the emotions they can provoke, said to me, when was the last time you went to confession? Up, not like that. She did not say it that peacefully, okay? She did not say it that peacefully. That was me mellowing down, African mom. African mom don't say it that peacefully. It's not, she didn't, it's not, if you know, you know. So I was dragged to church, but before the second child of Mary. Let's call him Father James. He was a priest consecrated to Jesus through Mary and an avid promoter and devotee to Our Lady of Perpetual Help. But I didn't know all that just yet. All I knew was after I told him all my mortal sins, my litany of mortal sins, yet he looked at me with eyes full of compassion and understanding, like he even smiled comfortingly at me, despite all the horrible things I thought and said. There before me in this priest, I beheld the face of God's glory, his forgiveness and mercy. And I became a frequent confessionee after that, going every week. And every time, Father James' counsel gave me the encouragement and peace to keep going despite the magnificent disappointment of not getting in. And you may be wondering, did I just mess up? I did mess up saying magnificent. But at the same time, I also believe it's a perfect mess up now I think about it, because every disappointment is a blessing. And we'll cover that maybe another day. But if you look forward to hearing more about my story, simply subscribe and let me know in the comments, and we'll get to it someday. But I'll give a hint today why the disappointment of not getting into university became magnificent. One of the reasons, and this is because of the third child of Mary, who was assigned to my case. She was a classmate's mom. And I would not have known her if she had not been moved by the Spirit to make it her mission to help me get into university despite my dad's refusal to help or cooperate and my mom's inability to do so, to help. Despite all my reluctance and resistance, she made it her mission to encourage and strengthen my soul. And she told me one time when she hired me to do a few illustrations for her books that the dreams that are in my heart, God put them there and he wants them too, and that his plan for my life will happen and he'll make it happen, and that I have to trust him and remember who he is and remember his promises despite the situation I'm going through, despite whatever I'm going through. And now she didn't say all this back then, but since that dark time she has continued to be the godmother, my actual godmother, and confirmation sponsors weren't maybe not even because of their fault, but because in the church that I went to get at the time I was confirmed, there were so many. It's a church in Africa. It's like a Nigerian church. It's like there's so many kids with confirmation that they don't really. I don't think they can really have specific sponsors for each kid, because that would take too long. So they just kind of get two people who are members of laity, and they make them sponsors for everyone else. But I mean, those sponsors. I mean, they don't know everyone, and I don't think they can know everyone and guide them all spiritually. I think maybe it'd be too much for them, being working members of society. So yeah, I don't even know their names. I guess their names on my baptismal this thing, but on my baptismal card and my document that has my confirmation, but I didn't know them. Cut long story short. So this wonderful third child of Mary, when I'm having a hard time, she calls it's like clockwork. and she's always ready to pour wisdom and encouragement into my heart. And with these 3 children of Mary on my case, it wasn't long before I got to know Mary herself. Like Father James, right? That's what we're calling him. One day in confession, he brought up a novena we could do together in the new year, and that was 2022 at the time. Around the same time, during adoration, I stared at Jesus from the back of the church. I remember looking around and wanting my life in the gates that were stained out with innocence and I found myself looking at the thought was so strong yet bizarre. I wasn't sure if it was my own, and yet it sounded like me. And me, I was like, it sounded like a me who was truer, like a me who knew herself. I don't know, like the true me who I'd yet to become familiar with, you know, the true me who really knew what she wanted in life. And it's like, it was really cool. And I you know, being, yeah, you know, I like to think of it like this. Like, you know, heaven is outside of time and space. So I kind of like think, like, what if that was like a word from the me who made it into heaven? So she said it back to like the me who's still on the way, you know, like one Christian time travel fantasy. You know, we like to play. But in general, that whole I want to be a great saint, that usually follows when you wear a miraculous melody. You find yourself with that desire. Mary stirs that desire in you, and so it's pretty cool, right? It happens to people, and I learned this way after. I was like, whoa, so this is not unique to me. But anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I remember this, and I also remember clarity I received, perhaps at another time or near this time, but a clarity that brought reality into a noticeably sharper focus than I had ever seen it before, like ever seen the world around me before. Like, reality just became sharper, and I don't know how else to describe that. I told him to happen. So Father James forgot that he had promised to do me in the new year, but I reminded him, and it was then that he gave me Our Lady of Perpetual Help novena booklet for free, and he told me how to pray it, and then, you know, sent me on my way, kindly, of course, you know. And I can't remember what I prayed for, what I prayed the novena for, but I do remember taking the act of consecration by or with Saint Alphonsus de Gori. And though you're supposed to pray it every month, and I undoubtedly slacked off, I feel like for the first month, Mary didn't forget it, you know, and she, yeah, I forgot it. I kind of forgot it, and I never returned to renew it, but Mary didn't. In fact, I think she took it way more seriously than I ever did. So as I grew in my journey in Christ, like as happens to people, you may have heard this, you may even be familiar with this, I kind of began to get diabolical attacks, you know, nightmares, sleep paralysis, just the creepy experiences that happen, right? And it was then that I happened to hear of consecration to Mary from Jackie and Bobby Angel on Ascension Presents. And the Home Depot chain looked cool, but it was the protection from diabolical attacks that jumped at me. Like Mary would keep me safe in her womb, under her mantle, away from the devil who sought to pull me away from Christ. So February 11th, Our Lady of Lourdes, I was consecrated after 33 days of preparation with St. Louis Mary de Montfort. And the grace that have flown forth since have been phenomenal. Like, that was the February 11th, 2024, right? And like, since then, like, there have been so many, not just graces, but also, like, so much clarity. So I think some of the dates may need to be bumped up like a year, but whatever. What was I saying? I don't know. Anyway, so I don't even know what was I saying earlier. Like, of course I believe, you know. It took me recounting all the ways that God has blessed me through Mary. Like, I need to remember to believe and say without any doubt that I believe. Like, isn't that something? But that's something unfamiliar, because that's our biggest problem as human beings. We forget God's hand in our lives so easily, and if we don't remind ourselves, if we don't carry from our own Jordan River stones from the riverbed, if we don't look at those stones and remember, then how easy it is for us to give in to the voice of doubt, like the devil's voice, you know? Like, did God really say? Will God really do? Can I trust God? Is God real? And this is why we must keep our eyes on God, like his promise and his faithfulness to them. like who he's shown himself to be in our lives, who he's shown himself to be in the Word. And yes, in all the Word, like the Word of God, like the Bible, but in the Word himself, like in Jesus. You know, because there's one place in the Bible where Jesus expresses frustration with his apostles for like forgetting his abilities, and that's like Mark 8:14-21. It's like basically the disciples had forgotten to bring bread, and Jesus like used that as like a segue to say, you know, watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. And they were like just so, oh my gosh, I can so see myself in this. They were like, it's because we have no bread. Dude, why did you forget the bread? Now we're getting told off by Jesus. And then, like, aware of this, Jesus is like, why are you talking about not having bread? Like, you guys, seriously, do you not understand? Like, are your hearts hardened? Like, do you have eyes that fail to see, like, and ears that fail to hear? Like, don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? And they're like 12. And just like, and when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? And they're like 7. And just like, do you still not understand? And I think this highlights the biggest danger of forgetting, because the more we forget, the more we're inclined to rebellion, the more we're inclined to you know, lean into the yeast of the Pharisees and out of Herod, you know, because we forget God and take matters into our own hands, which is like that pride that puffs up, like how yeast puffs bread up, you know, and pride leads to a fall, you know. Eve in the garden, doubt, then pride wanting to be on the same level as God. She took the fruit, she ate it, you know what I'm saying? So we can quickly go from doubt to despair to hate. And in between each of those stages is anxiety, fear, anger, envy, pride, lust, greed, gluttony, and sloth. You know, all the 7 deadly sins. And a classic and popular instance of this is the golden calf incident in Exodus 32. After the Israelites had been miraculously delivered from Egypt, which included the plague of frogs and locusts, God darkened the sun, and the river being filled with blood, which were like ways God showed himself to be greater than all the Egyptian gods. And they crossed the Red Sea, and they were witnessing God's power in the wilderness, like literally manna fell from heaven. But they quickly forgot his mighty works and turned to idolatry. And Exodus 32, verse 1-6 tells us that the moment Moses turned his back and went up Mount Sinai to get the 10 commandments from God, the people grew impatient, and they forgot the miracles God had performed and turned to Aaron and demanded that he had make them gods to worship, you know? And Aaron, despite knowing the truth, gave in to their demands and crafted a golden calf for them. And it's like, are you kidding me? But also like, I'm guilty of that too. Like, whenever I allow myself grow anxious, whenever I allow myself freak out, let things disturb me in my peace, a popular saint said, God has commanded us to pray and forbidden us to worry. And Saint Teresa of Avila also said, let nothing disturb you. Like, if we keep our eyes on God and who he's shown himself to be in our lives and in the Bible, of course in the Bible, then we can trust in the Lord and renew our strength. We can run and not grow weary. We can soar like eagles. Just like Isaiah the prophet, whose quote I just, stole. Like, his life was marked by unwavering trust to God, even when facing rejection, political chaos, and personal hardship. Like, through him, we learn that when we keep our eyes on God, we are renewed, strengthened, and given a purpose that transcends the challenges of life. Another person whose story is a great example of this is Joseph in Genesis, right? Like, Joseph's story is filled with moments where he had every reason to give up and become bitter. From being sold into slavery by his brothers to being falsely accused and thrown into prison. Like, Joseph endured so many trials, but through it all, he remained focused on God and trusted in his plan. And in the end, he was put in charge of all his possessions, right? Like, all of Pharaoh's possessions. It's incredible, right? Especially when you think that this is the guy who was thrown in a pit by his brothers. This is the guy who was accused of trying to sleep with his master's wife. This is the guy who was locked in a prison cell for years. Like, locked there, and it seemed he'd been forgotten. And yet, now, in the end, he was put in charge of all of Pharaoh's possessions. He was put in charge of all his possessions. Like, it's incredible, right? Oh, I digress. I always do, but it's just God is just so awesome, and it's my genuine belief that through the Rosary-in-a-Year podcast, like Our Lady will save the world. Just as Saint Louis Maria de Montfort once said, as he foretold, that in the last times a great many children of Mary shall go out and step on Satan's head, and while Satan may snap at their heel, they shall crush his head. To me, it seems no coincidence that the Rosary-in-a-Year podcast has reached number 1 in the US as we enter into the final saga of the salvation story. And I know it's the end of the world and all that, but a part of me gets a bit excited. Like, maybe because it means my Savior is coming soon. Maybe because I'm going to be able to see all the wonder the apostles got to see. Jesus rising into heaven and being hidden from their sight by the clouds, and the angels saying, in the same way you see him leave, he shall return. Like, oh my days, I can't wait, And interesting side note, but I have a theory. They say in the Bible that when Jesus returns, all eyes will see him, right? But could that be because of the tech times we live in? Couldn't it be that maybe all eyes will see Jesus return because it will be so shocking that every news outlet, every streamer, everything will stream, all the streams will stream Jesus returning, because what is happening? I thought this was all fiction, but it's really happening, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, what is this? Am I crazy? What do you think? What do you guys think? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. And how was your Rosary-in-a-Year day 7? If you like this, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Lord bless you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he turn his countenance towards you and grant you peace. Amen. God bless you, and bye. Also, let me know, one more thing. Let me know, what do you guys think, of this style of doing the Rosary-in-a-Year experience series? Do you feel like this? Do you feel like this way? I mean, just as if I'm talking to a friend, sending a voice note to a friend. Do you feel like this works for you, or do you prefer a bit more structure? What do you guys think? I'll see you in the next one. Let me know in the comments below. Love you guys. Bye. God bless you.